4. By noon, I had already decided I was invisible, not lonely in the dramatic way people write about in journals, not broken enough for anyone to notice, just quietly invisible. 4. Like the old coffee stain on the kitchen counter, nobody cleaned, because everyone had learned to look around it. I was standing at the sink with my sleeves rolled up, sunlight pouring through the apartment window. 4. Washing the same mug for the third time, because I didn't know what else to do with my hands, when my roommate walked in with a girl beside him and said the one sentence that changed the shape of my whole life. 4. She asked, the one who talks about you every night. Before I could even turn around properly, the girl froze near the doorway, her fingers wrapped around the strap of a faded canvas bag, her cheeks suddenly pale. 4. Her eyes full of a shock so deep it looked almost like fear. My roommate Arvin smiled like he had just revealed a harmless secret, but the room went silent in a way that felt heavy, almost sacred. Outside, the city was bright and ordinary. 4. Cars moved below us, someone laughed on the sidewalk. A delivery truck honked at the corner. But inside our small apartment, everything stopped. If you believe kindness can find people even after life has made them feel forgotten, please like, 4. Comment, share, and subscribe to Echo Frame. And tell me in the comments if you believe second chances arrive when we least expect them. My name is Caspian Vale, and for almost a year, I had lived in that apartment like a shadow. 4. I worked daytime shifts at a neighborhood bookstore, came home with paper cuts on my fingers and dust on my sleeves, cooked simple meals, paid rent on time, and tried not to take up too much space. Arvin was different. He was loud, charming. 4. Always surrounded by friends, always rushing somewhere, always promising he would introduce me to people, and then forgetting. I didn't hate him for it. I had spent most of my life being easy to forget. 4. The girl he brought home that afternoon was named Maricel Hart. She wasn't dressed like someone arriving for drama. She wore a soft blue cardigan, loose jeans, and white sneakers marked with rain stains, even though the day was clear. 4. Her hair was tied back carelessly, and there was something tired but gentle in her face, like she had been smiling for other people for too long. She looked at me as if she already knew me. 4. And somehow that made me more uncomfortable than if she had looked away. Arvin dropped his keys into the bowl by the door, and said she was his cousin's friend, that she needed a quiet place to sit for a while, because her day had collapsed. 4. Then he laughed and added that she might feel safe here, because apparently she had been talking about me for weeks. Maricel's eyes flashed toward him, embarrassed and hurt, and I realized he had not understood what he had exposed. 4. He thought it was a joke. She looked like he had opened a letter meant to be buried. I wanted to disappear, but instead I dried my hands and offered her water. That was all. No clever line, no teasing, no questions. 4. Just water in a clean glass placed carefully on the table between us. Her fingers trembled when she took it. Arvin kept talking, explaining that Maricel volunteered sometimes at the community reading room next to my bookstore. 4. That she had seen me helping an old man carry books to the bus stop. See me leaving sandwiches for the homeless painter, who slept near the alley. See me quietly pay for a child's damaged library book, when his mother looked like she might cry. 4. Things I had done and forgotten because they were small, because nobody noticed small things. But she had noticed. Maricel sat at our kitchen table in the hard golden light of afternoon, and looked at me with tears she was trying to hold back. 4. She said she talked about me every night, because she had started believing people were only kind when they wanted something. Then she saw me day after day, helping people who could give me nothing. 4. At first I thought she was making me into someone better than I was. I wanted to tell her I was not some hero, that I was just a tired man who knew what it felt like to be left alone. 4. But the words stayed inside me, because her sadness was bigger than my discomfort. That day I learned why she had come with Arvin. She had ended an engagement that morning. Not with screaming. 4. Not with betrayal dramatic enough to make sense to strangers, but with a quiet truth that hurt worse. Her fiancé had loved the version of her that never needed anything. He loved her when she was cheerful, useful, agreeable. 4. Beautiful in photographs, patient at dinners, forgiving after insults. But when her father got sick, when bills piled up, when she became tired and afraid, he told her she had changed. That morning in broad daylight. 4. While people passed outside the cafe window, he slid the ring back across the table and said, maybe they were no longer right for each other. So Maricel walked for hours with the ring in her bag and nowhere to go, for Arvin found her near the bookstore, because his cousin had called him. And somehow she ended up in my kitchen, exposed by a careless sentence, ashamed that the quiet stranger she had admired now knew her heart had been broken, for I did not give her advice. I had received too much useless advice in my life to offer it cheaply. I made tea. I warmed leftover soup. I opened the window because the apartment had grown too still, for Arvin eventually realized the mood was serious and slipped out to take a call, leaving us alone in the soft noise of the city. Maricel apologized for making things awkward. I told her awkward was better than pretending pain was not in the room, for something changed after that. Not quickly, not like movies where broken hearts heal in one montage, but slowly, like sunset moving across a floor. Maricel began stopping by the bookstore in the afternoons. At first, for she pretended she was only browsing. She would stand near the poetry shelf, touching spines without reading titles, while I stacked returns behind the counter. Then she started bringing coffee, Then she started sitting by the front window during my lunch break, telling me small pieces of her life, as if testing whether I would use them against her. I learned she had raised her younger brother after their mother died, I learned she loved old postcards, hated loud restaurants, and cried during commercials where families reunited at train stations. I learned she had once wanted to become a children's book illustrator, but life had trained her to choose practical things. She worked as an office coordinator at a medical clinic, where she remembered every patient's name but forgot to eat lunch. She gave so much of herself away that by the time she met me, she barely knew what remained. And she learned about me too. Not all at once. I told her about my childhood in a house where silence was safer than honesty, I told her how my older brother was praised for everything, while I became the dependable one nobody celebrated, I told her I moved cities after a woman I loved married someone else and invited me to the wedding because she thought I was mature enough to handle it. Maricel did not laugh. She did not say everything happens for a reason. She just listened, and for the first time in years, being seen did not feel dangerous. But healing is never a straight road. Her ex-fiancé, Calloway, returned 3 weeks later with flowers and a speech polished enough to sound sincere, he waited outside the clinic in the afternoon, wearing the gray coat she had bought him, telling her he had made a mistake. Maricel told me about it with her eyes fixed on the bookstore floor. I could hear the old pull in her voice, for the familiar fear that maybe a familiar pain was better than an unknown future. I wanted to tell her not to go back. I wanted to tell her he did not deserve her. But love, even when it has not yet been spoken, must not become another cage, So I only asked her whether being with him made her feel more like herself or less. She cried then, not loudly, just quietly into her sleeve while sunlight fell across the table between us. She said she did not know who herself was anymore, that became our beginning. Not romance yet, something deeper and more patient. Every afternoon when my shift ended and hers did too, we walked through the city in daylight. We passed bakeries and schoolyards, bus stops and flower stalls, ordinary places that somehow became gentle, because we were both learning how to exist without performing. One day, she brought a sketchbook and showed me drawings she had hidden for years. They were beautiful, tender little scenes of children holding lanterns, lonely houses with warm windows, birds carrying ribbons across cloudy skies. I told her the drawings felt like prayers. She looked away, but she smiled, Arvin noticed before either of us admitted it. He started leaving the apartment when she came over, suddenly remembering errands that did not exist. He stopped joking about her talking about me every night, maybe because he finally understood it had never been a joke. One Saturday afternoon he pulled me aside and said I looked different. I asked what he meant. He said I looked like someone had turned a light on, inside a room I had forgotten I owned, Then came the day everything almost fell apart. Maricel's father was rushed to the hospital during a bright, merciless afternoon. She called me from the sidewalk outside the clinic, her voice so shaken I could barely understand her, I left work without asking permission, ran 6 blocks, and found her standing near the curb with both hands pressed to her mouth. We reached the hospital together. But Calloway was already there, standing beside her brother, speaking calmly to the nurses, acting like the man everyone expected him to be. For a moment I saw Maricel look at him with relief, and something inside me stepped backward. I told myself kindness did not mean ownership, for I told myself if she needed him, I would not make her feel guilty for it. So I stayed in the waiting room while her family gathered. I bought water bottles, I found phone chargers. I brought sandwiches nobody ate, for I became useful because useful was safer than hoping. Hours passed, afternoon turned golden. The doctor finally said her father was stable, but weak. Everyone cried from exhaustion. Calloway reached for Maricel's hand, and I looked away, for I thought that was the end of whatever had been quietly growing between us. I thought life had reminded me of my place, the good man in the corner, the one people appreciate but do not choose. Then Maricel crossed the waiting room. She did not run, for she walked slowly past her brother, past Calloway, past the relatives, whispering near the vending machines. She came straight to me, sat beside me, and rested her head on my shoulder, as if it was the only place her body knew how to breathe, for I did not move. I barely breathed. Her hand found mine, and in front of everyone she held it. Later, outside the hospital in the warm evening light, she told Calloway goodbye. Not cruelly, not with anger. She thanked him for coming, but said she could not return to a life where love depended on her being easy to carry. She said she had found someone who never asked her to be smaller, someone who made quiet feel safe. Calloway looked at me then, and for once I did not lower my eyes. Months later, Maricel's drawings appeared in the bookstore window. I had spoken to my manager, arranged a small community display, and printed little cards with her name on them, she arrived thinking we were just meeting for lunch, and when she saw her artwork framed in the sunlight, she covered her mouth and cried so hard people stopped to look. Children pressed their faces to the glass. An old woman bought the first print, Maricel kept whispering that she could not believe anyone would want something she made. I told her, people had wanted her light for years, they had just called it something else. Our love did not arrive with fireworks, it arrived in shared lunches, hospital chairs, bookstore dust, quiet walks, and the courage to stay when leaving would have been easier, it arrived because a careless roommate brought a heartbroken girl into a sunny apartment and accidentally revealed that she had been noticing the invisible man all along. And maybe that is how some miracles happen. Not through grand gestures, but through small kindnesses repeated, until someone hurting begins to believe they are real. Near the end of that year, on another bright afternoon, Maricel and I stood in the same kitchen where we first met, the old coffee stain was gone, because she had scrubbed it one day, while laughing at how stubborn it was. Arvin was moving out to live with his fiancée, and the apartment was full of boxes and sunlight. Maricel held one of her postcards in her hand, a drawing of a man at a sink, a girl at a doorway, and light stretching between them like a bridge. On the back, she had written that the kindest people are often the ones who think nobody sees them. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echo Frame. Your support helps stories about kindness, healing, and second chances reach someone who may need hope today. And before the ending, comment this special line, I still believe kindness can change everything. That afternoon, Maricel taped the postcard above the kitchen counter, exactly where the stain used to be. Then she slipped her hand into mine and rested her head against my shoulder, not because she was broken, not because she needed saving, but because she had chosen to stand there. For the first time in my life, I did not feel invisible. I felt found, and sometimes being found by one heart is enough to make the whole world bright again.